عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري أنه قال عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغتيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وسرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. الله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدا يا رسول الله، تأذن لي أن أكل معك تحت الكساء. فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدا، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم ها هو ما ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب لواء، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بدعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومى بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يعلمني ما يعلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم، إنهم مني وأنا منهم. واجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات، إني ما خلقت سماء مفنيا ولا أرضا مدهيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي العالي يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمر منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم معكم وهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء صلى على محمد. فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبي واستفاني بالرسالة النجية ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وهفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلا يتفرقوا. وقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. وقال النبي الثانية يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة النجية ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. وقال علي إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فعلوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Usually Quran is before dua and before hadith kisa. Make an exception this time. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يوفون بعهد الله ولا ينقضون الميثاق والذين يصلون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويخشون ربهم ويخافون سوء الحساب والذين صبروا ابتغاء وجه ربهم وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية ويدرؤون بالحسنة السيئة أولئك لهم عقبى الدار جنات عدن يدخلونها ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم والملائكة يدخلون عليهم من كل باب سلام عليكم بما صبرتم فنعم عقبى الدار جنات عدن يدخلونها ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم والملائكة يدخلون عليهم من كل باب سلام عليكم بما صبرتم سلام عليكم بما صبرتم فنعم عقبى الدار صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات तू बड़ी दुखी है फातिमा 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 अब भी रो रही है फातिमा अब भी रो रही है फातिमा जो रिदा तेरी है फातिमा जो रिदा तेरी है फातिमा खून से भरी है फातिमा खून से भरी है फातिमा पसलियों से रिस रहा है खून पसलियों से रिस रहा है खून सांस ले रही है फातिमा सांस ले रही है फातिमा फातिमा को खा गई ये बात फातिमा को खा गई ये बात झूठ के रही है फातिमा झूठ के रही है फातिमा ठोकरों से मारते हो क्यों ठोकरों से मारते हो क्यों दुख्तरे नबी है फातिमा दुख्तरे नबी है फातिमा गिर गए हैं मुँह के बल अली गिर गए हैं मुँह के बल अली आज चल बसी है फातिमा आज चल बसी है फातिमा नींद से हुसैन उठ गए नींद से हुसैन उठ गए याद आ रही रही है फातिमा, याद आ रही है फातिमा। कातिलों के नाम भी न लूं, कातिलों के नाम भी न लूं, कैसी बेबसी है फातिमा, कैसी बेबसी है फातिमा। तू बड़ी दुखी है फातिमा, तू बड़ी दुखी है फातिमा, अब भी रो रही है फातिमा, अब भी रो रही है फातिमा। सलवात।
पर मोहम्मद वाल मोहम्मद सलवात। हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा, वो देखो ज़ैनब कुलसूम रो रही है वहाँ, वो देखो ज़ैनब कुलसूम रो रही है वहाँ, तड़प के भैया हसन कर रहे हैं आओ फुगा, ना जाओ ऐसे भरे घर के छोड़ कर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा, तुम हमसे रूठ के जाती हो इस तरह बोलो, तुम हमसे रूठ के जाती हो इस तरह बोलो, मैं तुमको जाने नहीं दूंगा, आँख तो खोलो, नहीं तुम्हारे बिना उम्र का बसर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा, ये कैसा दौर हमें वक्त ने दिखलाया, ये कैसा दौर हमें वक्त ने दिखलाया, सरों से उठ गया बचपन में आपका साया, कटेगा कैसे तेरे बाद ये सफर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा, मैं तुमको कब से जगाता हूँ क्यों नहीं उठती, मैं तुमको कब से जगाता हूँ
क्यों नहीं उठती, सदाएं देता हूँ रो रो के, बोलती ही नहीं। खुदा रा बोलो के फटता है अब जिगर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा। शहीद हो गया मोहसिन, जलाया घर अम्मा। शहीद हो गया मोहसिन, जलाया घर अम्मा। तुम्हारा पहलू है जख्मी, गिराया दे अम्मा। बनाम देना ये नाना को सब खबर अम्मा, हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा। हुसैन आया है देखो तो एक नजर अम्मा। सलवात।
आप लोगों के सामने जनाब ज़हरा की मुनासबत से दो बंद सलाम के और उसके बाद एक मरसिया, चंद बंद उसके हैं। फातिहा। मतलए दीन पे अनवार फिशा है ज़हरा, मतलए दीन पे अनवार फिशा है ज़हरा। नाज़ आदम को है खातून जिना है ज़हरा। साक़िए हाशर पे दर, साक़िए कौसर शौहर, साक़िए हाशर पे दर, साक़िए कौसर शौहर। उस पे ये फ़ख्र के हसनैन की माँ है ज़हरा। मतलए दीन पे अनवार फिशा है ज़हरा। है नबी आगे अली पीछे तो दो सिमत इमाम, है नबी आगे अली पीछे तो दो सिमत मजबूत ईमान, अरे कितनी मजबूत फसीलों में निहा है ज़हरा, मतलए दीन पे सलावत। कहती थी रो के ज़ैनबे नाला जवाब दो, खामोश क्यों हो ऐ मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, क्या हो गया ये हश्र का सामा जवाब दो, रोती है बेटी आपकी कुर्बान जवाब दो, रोती है बेटी आप पे कुर्बान जवाब दो, अब तो बराए खल्क़े यज़दा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा, हाय अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, नाना से सर से नाना का साया सर से उठा, सब्र कर लिया, पहलू पे दर गिराया गया, सब्र कर लिया, उम्मत ने जो जो जुल्म किया, सब्र कर लिया, इस जुल्म का गिला न किया, सब्र कर, इस जुल्म का गिला न किया, सब्र कर लिया, कैसी थी साबरा मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब, हाय अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, भाई हसन हुसैन है गिरिया उठो उठो, कुनबा है अब तुम्हारा परेशान उठो उठो, कुछ बोलती नहीं मेरी अम्मा उठो उठो, कैसी लगी है नींद में कुर्बान उठो उठो, कैसी लगी है नींद में कुर्बान उठो उठो, ज़ैनब गाए अब किसी अम्मा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब, हाय अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, भाई का ब्याह भी ना रचाना हुआ नसीब, है दुल्हन को घर में ना लाना हुआ नसीब, बस हाय तुमको रोना रुलाना हुआ नसीब, दिल में न चैन तुमको बसाना हुआ नसीब, दिल में न चैन तुमको बसाना हुआ नसीब, क्या क्या था दिल में आपके अम्मा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, ऐ मेरी गमज़दा दिल फ़िगार अम्मा जान, महबूब किबरिया की आज़ादार अम्मा जान, क्या हो गई जहाँ से बेजार अम्मा जान, कुछ तो कहो ज़बां से एक बार अम्मा जान, कुछ तो कहो ज़बां से एक बार अम्मा जान, बेटी खड़ी है मुस्तरो हैरान जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो, देने लगे जो गुस्ल तो रोए बहुत अली, थामा जिगर को पहलू पे जिस दम नजर पड़ी, फारिग जो गुस्ल से हुए रोकर सदा ये दी, ज़ैनब बाबाओ देख लो दीदार आखिरी, ज़ैनब बाबाओ देख लो दीदार आखिरी, बेटी तुम्हारी आती है नाला जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो। जन्नत को ए नबी की दिलो जान जाइए, अब घर हमारा हो गया सुमसान जाइए, फिर एक बार हो लो तो कुर्बान जाइए, खालिक है अब तुम्हारा निगहबान जाइए, खालिक है अब तुम्हारा निगहबान जाइए, क्या दाग हमको दे गई अम्मा जवाब दो, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब, अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब, हाय अम्मा जवाब दो मेरी अम्मा जवाब दो।
Let's hear right loud salawat, please. Allah. The sponsors of tonight's programs are Mr. and Mrs. Murad Ali Khan, Mr. and Mrs. Sajid Kazmi, Mr. and Mrs. Sadiq Ali Khan, and Mr. and Mrs. Kumail Ali Khan. Also, please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumeens of their families, including Vikharun Nisa Begum, Sayyid Vikhar Hussain Muswi, Asghari Alam, and Sayyid Hussain Zaidi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salawat. Please recite 5 times Amma-Yujib for the health of Sayyid Qurban Hasnain, Mr. Murad Ali Khan himself, and also many others who are in need of our du'as. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Amma-Yujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshifu su'u. Amma-Yujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshifu su'u. Amma-Yujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshifu su'u. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ وَيَجْعَلُكُمْ خُلَفَاءَ الْأَرْضِ إِلَٰهًا وَإِلَٰهًا قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Salawat. A reminder that the Majlis will be here for tomorrow also at 5 p.m. inshallah. So please be here for tomorrow. These are the series of Majalis for the Shahadat of Bibi Fatima Khatun Jannat. And also a social announcement. Yesterday there was a gathering for Murshdan Muslims. They call M&M basically. I'm proud of our youth, including Elia, Jafri, and Zahir. They really showed their leadership amongst the Muslim community of Murshdan. And I urge all those others who are also residents of Murshdan to please take part in it and make your presence felt, and make sure that you do participate in the activities of the Muslim community of this town, because it really makes them feel that you're also an active member of the community, and it gives support to the youth. And they did a very, very nice job yesterday, mashallah. They had a very good dinner, and they showed their leadership skills. I'm proud of them, mashallah. And I request others who are residents of this town to please do take part in it. Maybe Zahir, they can create a website chat, a phone tree or something like that, so that they can then inform them of the activities in Moorstown of those of that club, inshallah. So please do take part in it. And with the loud salawat, let's welcome Sheikh Bilal to the member, inshallah. Salawat.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا للمسائب الزهراء. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the masa'ib and tribulations of the daughter of Rasulullah. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Duha, Allah makes a statement to our Prophet. He says, وَلَا سَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. Soon your Lord will give to you, and you shall be pleased with what Allah provides you. Now the context of this verse in Surah Al-Duha sometimes is taken to see that this is referring to the akhirah. Because in the verse before this, Allah mentions and He says, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. That certainly what comes afterwards will be better for you than what has already come. However, amongst the Mufassirin, one of the opinions is that Allah is not describing an affair of the akhirah because He is promising that I will give you. And that if He doesn't give him in this world, that means that the promise of the Quran is incomplete. So the description that the giving that Allah promises, وَلَا سَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى, that soon I will give you and you will be pleased, has to be satisfied in dunya before akhirah. Otherwise, it would say that the Quran, na'uzu billah, is naqis, that it made a commitment and promise that no one saw completed. Because people would complain, Allah made a promise in the Quran, where is the fulfillment of that promise? Which is why some of the Mufassirin pair this verse, وَلَا سَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى, with the verse of إِنَّا أَعْتَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ. Because Allah is saying, certainly we have given you Kawthar. That Allah is saying to the Holy Prophet, I have given you Kawthar. This Kawthar that is described here literally translates to Khayr al-Kathir. Often we translate Khayr al-Kathir to abundance, plenty, a lot. But Khayr al-Kathir has to be defined, and it has to be defined in such a way that it can be something that explains the presence in this world, not just the akhirah. Because the ones who complain about the religion of Islam, they don't believe in the akhirah. So how is it that Allah is making a promise to give something in a way that can't be seen, and those who are not from amongst the Muslimin are supposed to accept and believe that this message is true? So therefore there is a reality to the promises of the Quran that has to be manifest in this world. Otherwise, the one who doesn't believe in the message would argue and say, you made promises to yourself of something that we can never prove and see, and therefore, how can I believe that your message is true? So the question came, what is khayr al-kathir? What is an abundance and goodness that would be given to our Prophet in this world, such that the promise of the Quran is fulfilled, and it is a great goodness in every definition of the term. To understand this, in Akhirah we say Kawthar is that pool of water that will be the only source of quenching your thirst on the Day of Judgment. And that the only one who will have possession of water that will quench the thirst of the people of the Day of Judgment is our Prophet Rahmatul lil Alameen Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. No disagreement. But there has never been a situation where we say that the Quran has only one explanation to it. Rather, we say, Al-Quran لِكُلُّ حَرْفٍ سَبْعِينَ بُطْنٌ. That every letter of the Quran has up to 70 different meanings. So therefore, to say that there is an explanation that fits this world, we can find within Surah Kawthar, look at the context of Surah Kawthar. إِنَّا أَعْتَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّا شَانِئَكَ هُوَ. The context of the surah is telling me where khayr al-kathir will come from. Allah makes a commitment to our Prophet. He says, certainly we have given you Kawthar. So therefore, pray to your Lord and sacrifice it in His way. And then it continues, Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. It will be your enemies who are then abtar. Abtar was an insult of the time, which meant the description of saying the equivalent to an animal whose tail has been cut off is one who is abtar, is one who is without lineage. So now Allah is describing that your enemies will see that they are the ones without a lineage. So now refer back. If the final verse is telling me that the enemy is the one without the lineage, then therefore the reference to khayr al-kathir and goodness will be a lineage that will be continuous, that flows forward. Hence the definition and explanation, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, is none other than the daughter of Rasulullah, Fatimatu Zahra sallallahu to understand and practically see the example of khayr al-kathir, the same way that our Prophet is rahmatul lil alameen. The goodness of our Prophet is not limited to himself in his house. Rather, the goodness of our Prophet is defined by the example that he laid out into society and the change that he brought. The same way when that rahmatul lil alameen is given a great goodness, the limitation of that goodness will not be something that he uniquely, individually feels, but rather that goodness will be something that is a goodness for all of humanity and society. So therefore, in tonight's discussion and tomorrow's is a description of the khayr al-kathir, the great goodness, the kawthar that is Fatimatu Zahra. In elaborating this discussion, and wanting to elaborate this discussion, we break this into two sections. Tonight is the discussion around the practical, materialistic, or worldly aspect, or the social example by which Fatimatu Zahra is khayr al-kathir. And tomorrow's discussion will be the spiritual, ideological aspect of how Fatimatu Zahra is khayr al-kathir. In this way, we will attempt to appreciate and have ma'rifah of what does it mean when Rasulullah gives someone khair, when Allah gives Rasulullah khair. When Allah wants to give goodness to His messenger, what does it look like? Along with this, I want to have a bit of an explanation about what it is that is truly the Messiah. So therefore, we have a lot to cover in a little bit of time. If you're with me, Sallu ala Muhammad. Sometimes I have to tell you what we're going to talk about, so I hold myself accountable. We have to finish the topic. In the discussion around the idea that Fatimatu Zahra is a great goodness in the social and materialistic aspect, we take a look at the three roles that say the Zahra plays in her life. One as a daughter, two as a wife, and three as a mother. And that in these three roles we find the attributes of how it is that she is an example for all of humanity and society, and not just a goodness in herself. And that for us is a learning from this. When we take a look at the idea of the first section of looking at her as a daughter, we see the relationship between father and daughter being established for all of humanity to learn from. The traditional concept of the relationship between a father and child, specifically a daughter, is that relationship of ri'ayah and pleasure. That is one of happiness and enjoyment. And especially when it comes to our daughters, our goal is that my daughter should never want for anything. My daughter is my princess. However, this isn't the relationship that Rasulullah establishes with his daughter. And the explanation of this is to say that if there's a perfect example of this relationship that should exist, it is manifest in the example for humanity. It is manifest in the example of what it is that Allah wants to see perfectly in His servants. When we traditionally look at the idea of what is a relationship between a father and daughter, we want it to be something that the daughter wants for nothing, the father provides for everything. But that's not how Rasulullah raises his daughter. Rasulullah raises his daughter in the aspect of educating her and preparing for her to be a part of society as a whole. Let me explain. What happens normally? The normal environment between a father and daughter is, my daughter, I give you everything you want, don't worry about anything. Everything is taken care of. Tell me what you want, I will give you. Before you will even ask, I will provide for you. And this is the traditional desire that happens between a father and a daughter. That my daughter is my innocence, is my purity. The boy has to go out and deal with things. The girl, no. But Rasulullah doesn't do this. Because what happens many times as a consequence of this relationship, when that daughter grows up and then she has to get married, she goes and gets married and joins her husband in a house and has no idea of how the world operates. And she enters into a completely new environment that goes as if she's going from heaven straight into hell. Why? She's not prepared for it. There was never any difficulty that she had to face. Now all of a sudden she has to make decisions, know what the budget of a household is, know what the difficulties of a household is, and she has no preparation for this concept. Rasulullah's demonstration with his daughter is a demonstration for us that you love your daughter, then prepare her to be a part of society. In Arabic we use the statement, كَانَ شَخْصِيَةٍ فَاعِلَةٍ, a capable individual who goes out and joins society as someone who has something of value to add to the society. How do we prepare that? Look and see the example of the relationship between the father and daughter, that Rasulullah would describe the attention that Sayyidah Zahra would give to him, that he would call her Umme Abiha, the mother of her father. Meaning she was so involved in the affairs of what the Prophet was going through and what the Prophet was performing, that she was one who would take care of the Prophet through these events. Our Prophet would describe that the last one I see before I leave and the first one I see when I return is my daughter Fatima. Now think about it, Rasulullah didn't always go on peaceful missions. At times he went to war. At times he went and came back injured. At times he went through great difficulty. He didn't hide these from his child. He didn't keep his child separate from all the problems of life. Rather, as he went through the experience, he incorporated his child in the process of being exposed to those experiences so that later, when the child would go on to their own and be an independent member of society, they would be well prepared and know of how to operate in a society and what are the difficulties and how do we face them. One of the examples that comes often is that we reference a hadith from the Ahlul Bayt that says, for the first 7 years, give your child freedom, they are the king. You are the servant, they are the king. For the second 7 years, you are the king and your child is the servant. And for the third 7 years, that this is your advisor and vizier. To understand this, which is a very valid hadith, there's nothing to doubt about the validity of the hadith, but the structure of the thought process that's implied here is that the first 7 years doesn't mean that the child is basically an animal, is wild. That's not the goal here. The Ahlul Bayt would describe that we give adab and character to our children from the beginning. The process is the discussion about the Islamic liability of knowing the ahkam and the responsibility to fulfill the ahkam, that the child is free from the obligation for the first 7 years. From the second 7 years begins the process of training this child and educating them on the wajibat and muharramat. That from 7 is the process where we begin now to introduce the concept of prayer, to introduce the concept of halal and haram, wajib and makruh and mustahab, and slowly inculcate them into the process of understanding that they have to pay attention to these elements. The concept of the third 7 years that talks about the idea of a vizier, it's not to say that now I turn to my child and okay, what do you think I should do in this situation? But what told you that the child at the age of 14 has an idea or an opinion to tell you how to make a decision? The point of them being the vizier is that now they are the one who are sitting in the advisory position that you should now discuss affairs and issues and how to make decisions with them, so that through this process they glean the knowledge of how they should make decisions in their life. This system of talking about the upbringing of a child is about the process of preparing that child to enter into society. Hence, the Prophet, when he is showing us the example through his daughter, he is incorporating her through all of these affairs, so that tomorrow when she gets married, when she has children, when she enters into a society and a community, she will know how to face difficulty and problems and have a valid opinion, a functional opinion about how to approach difficulty and to add value to society. Hence, we see that in the first role of Sayyidah Zahra, khayr al-kathir, for us, the great goodness that is Sayyidah Zahra is teaching us that even your children and our children follow the example of Rasulullah. Don't imagine that you can raise your child better than the Prophet would raise his daughter, but rather look and see that the Prophet involves them in this process. Don't make them someone who, when they have to enter into society, when they become married, when they become mature, that they have no way of adding value into society because they haven't seen anything. They have no concept of what something costs. They have no concept of how to face a difficulty. They have no concept to add value to society. Why? Because I never let them when they were my child. Instead, prepare your child and look at the concept of khayr al-kathir in the example of Sayyidah Zahra. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the second role of Sayyidah Zahra as a wife is first and foremost look and see of the process of selecting a spouse. Now, one of the important elements of selecting a spouse that is discussed in the affair of Sayyidah Zahra is quf. What is a quf? A quf is someone who is at your equivalent. Many times we look at the concept of equivalency under the idea of what is your career, what is your job, what is your position, what is your title that you bring to the table, and we say, okay, fine. My child is a doctor, your child is an engineer, alhamdulillah, that's a quf. My child, for example, is a lawyer, your child is a mechanic, not a quf. The concept of quf that's being discussed when Rasulullah talks about his daughter and talks about the finding of a spouse is not the quf and the equivalency in materialism. Materialism, if you know and you understand, we've been mature enough in our lives, no one goes on a straight line up. You have good days, you have bad days. You take a look at someone who's 30, that doesn't mean that will be his status for the rest of his life. And you look at someone who's 60 and that will be the status for the rest of his life. Financially looking for an equivalency means nothing, because who has seen what tomorrow brings? Rather, the concept of quf that Rasulullah is discussing in the concept of his daughter is the quf of spirituality and the concept of understanding faith and piety in the direction of looking and working towards Allah. Which is why he makes the statement, he says, Lawla Ali ma kana li Fatima quf ila yawmin fiha. Had it not been for Ali, there would have been no spiritual equivalent for Fatima until the day of judgment, that none would have been equivalent to her level of spirituality, piety, and worship. When we want to look for a spouse for our children, we want to look for someone who is good for ourselves or our children or our family, the most important element is that element that doesn't change with time. You can change your degree, you can change your career at any point in time. You can be a high-powered lawyer and then one day decide I want to run an ice cream shop. You can be someone who works in corporate America and one day decides, yeah, I want to be a Maulana. Ruin the poor girl's life. Speaking from experience. This changes. Material changes constantly. But what doesn't change is that identity that I tie myself to from the moment of birth till the moment I die. That is my association with Ahlul Bayt. That is my association and my ibadat of Allah. If my spouse doesn't understand my relationship with Allah, then how can they insist me on fulfilling my purpose in life? My purpose in life. I was created for heaven. My goal is to attain heaven. Anything short of that, I have sold myself for less than I am worth. So therefore, the concept of looking for a spouse, look and see that Rasulullah doesn't look at status, doesn't look at position. Sayyidah Zahra does not ask for dunya. She looks for and finds someone who is her equivalent in worship, which is why The day after the wedding of Sayyidah Zahra, Rasulullah comes to Ali, "Oh Ali, how did you find Fatima as a wife?" And Amir al-Mu'mineen replies and he says, "I did not find anyone better than her as a partner in the worship of Allah." Meaning the definition that today, when we want to look for a spouse, when we want to find someone who is a good spouse to marry, who is a good person to build a relationship, who should I look for to have a life with as a partner, the fundamental explanation of what is the best thing that you can do is in the example of Fatima to Zahra. Is the teaching in this example that for us to look and see how does Rasulullah look for a spouse for his child? How should we look for a spouse? What should I talk to my child about in the process of looking for a spouse? In this day and age, you have to understand something. If you don't talk to your child about what you should look for in a spouse, the media is talking to them. The media is putting ideas in their heads already about what their spouse should look like, what their spouse should earn, and how their life should be with their spouse. If you wait until your child is 21 and you say, okay, now we're going to start looking, what do you want? That child is not going to agree with the values that you want them to look at. They're already under the influence of the culture that they live in, and they will be looking for someone who, for example, wants to eat steak and watch movies and they want to have fun in this world and this life. To prepare your child, you have to look at the statement of Imam Ali, إِنَّ الْقَلْبِ الْحَدَثِ كَالْأَرْضِ الْخَارِيَةِ مَا تُلْقِي فِيهَا أَبِّلُهَا. What the heart of a child is like fresh earth. Whatever you give it, it accepts it. So meaning that child, when their heart is fresh, when they have not yet been exposed to the elements outside of society, is when you want to start preparing them and lay the seeds of what a spouse should look like. If you ask a child who is unexposed to society and unexposed to the media and unexposed to the culture of Western environment, at the age of 12, 11, what kind of a person do you want to marry? More often than not, the description they will give represents one of their parents, represents a pious figure in history, represents someone who they idealize based upon value, not upon attraction. That's the image you want to plant in the child's head, that look upon value, not attraction. Attraction will come. Allah places love in the hearts of people after they get married, not before they get married. And build that concept in the mind of the child to look at values in finding their spouse. Look at the concept of what they love and prioritize in their life before they are under the influence of the culture, to find what should life look like. And this is why the example in Fatima Zahra in her role as a wife is very extensive and expansive. But this fundamental concept of when do we start this conversation, how do we find the right individual, it needs to be on the basis of those values that will not change even if my socioeconomic status changes in life. There's a description that says, from Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam, it may be associated with one of the other Ahlul Bayt, but as I recall it, it's from our 8th Imam, that someone comes to the Imam and complains that your Shia are very poor, they are in great difficulty, they are always in financial stress, and your people are the fuqara, they are the poorest of the poor. Imam replies, no, they're not. They're the wealthiest of people. Man goes, how is that possible, Ya Rasulullah? How can they be? I'm telling you, they have no money, they have no wealth. They have nothing. The Imam turns to him and he says, if I gave you all of the wealth of the world today, would you give up your Iman? He goes, no, never. He says, then therefore there is no wealth that can buy you. You are the wealthiest of people, that no wealth takes the place of your faith. Hence, the preservation of this faith and identity doesn't take place later when it's time to make a decision. It begins earlier. And this is why the example that the Prophet establishes for us in his own daughter is an example for us to learn from. That how is it that we find a spouse and someone who's appropriate? The third of our discussion, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The role of a parent. And in this, we have a perfect example in the role of Sayyidah Zahra. Why? Because she doesn't describe her role as a parent. Her son describes her role as a parent. It is our second Imam, Imam Hassan ibn Ali al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. who makes the statement, he says, I have never seen someone who worshipped Allah more than I saw my mother worship Allah. The description that Imam Hassan gives of the worship of Allah that his mother did is one of the important elements for us to understand. Many of us want our children to pray. We want our children to be religious. We want our children to be pious. But if we're not living those values ourselves, don't expect your child to be more religious than you are. It doesn't work that way. You have to live the values you want your child to do. When you take a look and you see that, for example, today, a child, when they wake up from sleep, they find their parents on their phone scrolling. When they go to sleep, they find their parents on their phone scrolling. And then I wonder, why does my child not pray tahajjud? Baba, he's going to do the tahajjud you did. You did tahajjud of the phone, he's going to do tahajjud of the phone. If the child doesn't see the parents performing those actions of faith, don't expect the child to perform actions of faith. One of the classic instances, I want my child to read Quran. I want my child to read lots of Quran. I want my child to read Quran for the rest of his life. Very good. Excellent. But how did you teach him? You take that child, you hire a tutor, and you put him in front of the tutor. And now that tutor is constantly teaching your child to read Quran. What is the child learning from this? That as a child, I have to read Quran. When I grow up and mature, then my father who doesn't read Quran, I don't have to read Quran. That this action of reading Quran is for immature little children, but once you grow up, you don't have to do it anymore. Why? It's not my father or my mother who's reading Quran in front of me. It's not my father or my mother who's teaching me to recite Quran. It's someone else who's doing it while my father and mother are free having fun. So basically, I can't have fun as long as I'm a child. But when I grow up, then I can go have fun and I don't have to do this anymore. The same comes with ibadat. When it comes time for salat, my children annoy me, so I lock the door and I pray inside. I send them outside to pray. So what happens? Ibadat was not something the child witnessed. It became something separate, something isolated. So what happened then? The child saw it as that this is my responsibility. You have no right to say anything to me because I never got to see you do it. Why should you have anything to say about me doing it? And this is my personal relationship. It has nothing to do with you. And thus what happened, a separation came between the identity of faith and the identity of family. And faith became something that I make children do, and adults don't have to do it. Look at it today, and no disrespect intended to anyone here, but what is the concept of our madrasas that we have today? The parents drop the kids off, free babysitting service, and yalla out. And then when I come back, when the child's grown up enough, then he doesn't have to go study Islam anymore. Now you're done with Islam. Islam is finished for you. Why? I don't study Islam. I don't study Islam with you. I don't have to be here. You have to be here. This is your jail. And when you grow up enough, then you don't have to be in jail anymore. I can set you free. So the child looks at the responsibility of faith and identity as something isolated and separate from the family unit. That the family is something else, and this faith is an individual responsibility, and as a child I'm punished for it, and once I grow up I am free from it. Now look at the example of Sayyidah Zahra. That Imam Hassan explains and he says, I never saw someone who worshipped Allah more than my mother. When I would go to sleep, I would see my mother stand in the mihrab at night to pray. Not watching Netflix, not sitting in front of her phone, not enjoying herself that now that the children have gone to sleep, now it's my time to relax. Rather, he would say that when I would go to sleep, I would see my mother stand in the mihrab to worship and pray to Allah. He says, when I would wake up, I would find that my mother's feet had swollen from spending the entire night in the mihrab and worshiping Allah. The child goes to sleep seeing his mother doing ibadat of Allah and wakes to his mother doing ibadat. Do you understand the severity of the statement of Imam Hassan? How old is Sayyidah Zahra at this point? 50? 60? 70? She's shaheed at 18. Do you know what the ibadat of a 17-year-old has to be that her feet become swollen in ibadat? Imam Hassan says, I would lay awake at nights listening to the du'as of my mother. And I would hear her pray for everyone, but she never prayed for herself. And he would say, Ya Ummah, لماذا لا تدعي لنفسك? Why did you not make dua for yourself, mother? Look, the dua of the mother is not hidden from the child. And she explains, she says, Ya bunayya al-jar thumma ad-dar. Pray for your neighbors before you pray for yourself. Meaning that Imam Hassan is seeing the dua and hearing the dua of his mother. He's seeing her spending her nights in worship. He's seeing the value that when I have free time, what should I be doing with my free time? It's the culture and the etiquette that if we want faith to be preserved in our lineage, it's not going to be by telling my child to do something and not doing it myself. It's going to be that exposing the child to me doing the ibadah. Me showing what maturity looks like in the fact that I am the one worshipping and you can only attempt to follow me. And then promoting that to be the good quality to possess. The examples that were presented in this personality and all of these are an example of khayr al-kathir, that if you want your lineage, you want your household, you want your children, you want your environment to be positive, look and see at the relationship that's being created here. And inshallah, tomorrow night we'll continue this discussion in terms of the spiritual aspect of what is khayr al-kathir in Fatima. Sallu ala Muhammad Briefly, I want to explain a little bit of history. You see, the Masa'ib of Sayyidah Zahra are something that have impacted the lives of all of the Ayyam-e. There's a narration which says that Imam Rada sees his son, Jawad, sitting outside crying. Remember something, Imam Rada is only with his son, Imam Jawad, for 5 years before he's separated from his son. Meaning Imam Jawad is under the age of 5 and he weeps and cries bitterly. And Imam Rada asks him, "Oh my son, what made you cry? Why are you crying?" Imam Jawad replies, he says, "I am thinking of the masa'ib of my mother Zahra. And I am thinking of the abuse that she underwent. Baba, I wish that Allah would give me the tawfiq, I would remove their bodies from those graves and burn them for what they did to my mother." There's a description that describes and says that our 6th Imam would be overcome with fever. His body would burn with a fever. But this wasn't a fever of sickness. They said we would bring him buckets of cold water. He would pour them over his head and call out, "Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra." That the Masa'ib of Sayyidah Zahra were something that would cause the Imam's body to burn with fever. Meaning these Masa'ib, and the true impact of these Masa'ib is seen in Karbala. I'll mention it to you at the end of how Karbala is impacted by these Masa'ib. What happened at the house of Zahra? To understand what happens at the house of Sayyidah Zahra, it doesn't begin after the Shahadat of the Prophet, rather it begins before the Shahadat. There are narrations that describe to us and tell us that they said we would see Rasulullah in the months before his passing sit with Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he would whisper to Ali and we would see Ali become uncomfortable by the words of the Prophet. Until he would say, "Ya Rasulullah, what do you command me?" And Ali would reply, Rasulullah would reply, "Oh Ali, I command you to be patient. I command you to be patient. I insist you are patient." There are some who would look at this and say that Rasulullah was describing that after his shahada, that the right of Ali would be stolen, Ali would be told to be patient. The reality of the patience of Ali is revealed after the shahada of Rasulullah. We can only imagine that discussion. In the preparation for the shahada of the Prophet, he knew what was intended to happen after his shahada. There is something called Jaysh al-Osama, which is a very important event that as the Prophet becomes sick, and he comes close to the end of his life, he prepares a regiment of soldiers under the personality of Osama ibn Zayd. Osama ibn Zayd was an 18-year-old man, but he had a pedigree that was unique in the religion of Islam. Osama's father was Zayd ibn Harith. Zayd ibn Harith was someone who was raised by the hands of Rasulullah. Zayd was that slave or servant who was given from Sayyidah Khadija to Rasulullah. His father Harith eventually realized his son is a servant in Mecca and comes to the Holy Prophet and comes to the Prophet and says, I want to take my son home. And Rasulullah says to Zayd, you can go wherever you want to. And Zayd says, I want to stay with you, Ya Rasulullah. He was the adopted son of the Prophet before the rules of adoption were established. Zayd ibn Harith was one of the companions of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib in the Battle of Mu'tah. And then after Ja'far al-Tayyar is killed in Mu'tah, the next one to raise the flag is Zayd ibn Harith, and Zayd is killed in that exchange as well. And Zayd leaves behind a young son by the name of Osama. At the end of the life of Rasulullah, Osama is an 18-year-old man. And before Rasulullah dies, the last thing that he says is, I want to send an army from Medina to the northern border of Sham, where Osama's father and Ja'far were killed, for the Muslims to fortify the northern border against the Byzantine Empire. And in this army, Rasulullah commands every senior companion, every mature individual, everyone who had an interest in the authority of the government of Islam. Rasulullah takes all of these people and says, go with Osama. Now what happens? All of these people look and see, and they realize that Rasulullah is getting really sick. And if we leave, it may happen that by the time we come back, Rasulullah has died. So what do? They say, me, a mature man, me, one who is a seasoned warrior of Islam, follow the command of this child? I'm not going. Why would I listen to this child, Osama? What value is he? So therefore they refuse. Rasulullah, in the end of his life, he says, I am the one commanding you to go with Osama. And one who does not listen to me, I send my curse upon that one. I send la'na upon the one who does not listen to my command and go with Osama. Nobody went with Osama. Rasulullah's attempt was that all those who would be troublemakers after his shahada, remove them from the city. And each of those troublemakers knew that if we leave now, we'll miss our opportunity to take advantage of the power vacuum after the Prophet. And they refused to listen to the Prophet. This event of Jaysh Osama, the army of Osama, the regiment of Osama that was commanded, and the commands of the Prophet are something that every Muslim accepts happened in reality. The difference is that why did they refuse? Some say that they refused because, they cared about the Prophet. They couldn't stand the process and the idea of leaving the Prophet alone in his difficulty. Some refused because, we were listening to a child who was inexperienced, we told him to wait. We told him, wait, we'll go later. All of these excuses were presented with the interest that after the death of the Prophet, we shouldn't miss the opportunity of the power vacuum that will exist. Which is why as soon as the Prophet dies, it takes 1 day for Saqifa to take place. 1 day for the authority to be usurped. And within 1 day, for the right of Ali ibn Abi Talib to be stolen. The Prophet was not buried. The right was stolen first. Which is why the consequence of those who are power hungry, they knew that there is a bay'ah that we have to take. And until we take this bay'ah, we are standing on a pile of straw. And that was the bay'ah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So immediately after the shahadat of the Prophet, within the first number of days when the Khilafah was stolen, they said, we need the bay'ah of Ali to cement this straw structure that we've created. So they went to the house where Ali was. This was the house of Fatima. One of the arguments that's often made is, why was it that Sayyidah Zahra went to the door and not Ali? The point of that is that the exact aggression was against Ali ibn Abi Talib. It was Fatima Zahra who went to go diffuse the aggression against Ali ibn Abi Talib. Which is why they didn't come to the door once, they came over and over, at least 3 times. The first time when they were sent to the door to bring out Ali, Sayyidah Zahra came to the door and said, this is the house of the daughter of the Prophet. Dare you speak this way at my door? I am telling you to leave my house. And they became embarrassed and they left. They came a second time, with more force this time. And again, Sayyidah Zahra stood to the door and said, "This is my house. Have you forgotten who I am? Do you not know who I am? Do you not know whose door you have come to stand at?" And again, they became embarrassed and they left. When twice they failed, they said, "The mal'oon amongst the mal'ooni, the one who had no ghira, who had no character." And this time when he came, he says, "Bring everyone." كَانَ حُجُومًا عَلَى بَيْتِ فَاطِمَةَ. He brought every soldier who would then hit his sword against the shield, make a noise around the house of the daughter of Rasulullah in such a way that it was as if an active army had gathered at this door. And then this mal'oon said, "He won't come out, burn the house down." They went and they piled wood in front of the door. And again now Zahra comes in the protection of wilayah to diffuse the situation. And she puts out her hand and she says, "Do you not recognize this hand of mine? Do you not know who I am? I am the daughter of Rasulullah. You are putting firewood at my door when I am inside of this house." And the answer came back, "Walau. So what if you are inside?" They began to light this door on fire and they pushed the door. There's a conversation between Sulaym ibn Qais, who was not present, and he wants to know the veracity. Could it be possible that the daughter's house, the daughter of the Prophet's house? They describe and say that Sulaym did not have the confidence to go to Ali ibn Abi Talib, because Ali is the one who suffered through this. So he looked for someone who would authenticate the story, and in that he found Salman and Abu Dharr al-Mikdad. So Sulaym went to Salman al-Muhammadi and said, "Salman, hal dakhaluha?" Did they really enter the house of Zahra? Salman replied, "Ay, wa kana Fatima baynaha wal-bab." Salman is the one who replies to Sulaym. Sulaym is curious, the audacity, they dared to enter this house. Salman replies, "Yes, they entered, and Fatima was between the wall and the door." There are descriptions of this event that say that when she was pressed between this door, her feet were lifted from the ground, her ribs were broken, the nail of the door punctured her side, and her son Muhsin was killed in this condition. There are two statements. One that says they entered into the house, they took Ali and they took him out. The other description writes and says that when Ali found Fatima in this condition, he came to the door, pushed the one in front of him so hard he fell and broke his nose. And then he stopped and he said, "I swear if it was not Rasulullah who told me to be patient." They knew Ali has been commanded to be patient. They said, "Take Ali from the house." The question was asked, "How did you remove Ali from the house?" They said, "We knew Ali would be patient. So we put a rope around his neck and dragged him through the streets of Medina." One description says that as Fatima was pressed, she called out, "Oh Fizza, come to me, my Muhsin has been shaheed. Come to my aid." They say, "Then how did you find Ali?" They said, "We saw Ali run from the house and called, 'Fizza, bury him, because Ali cannot stand to see the sight of this Masoom killed in this condition.'" That Ali ibn Abi Talib was taken from this house in this condition, and they knew that now that we have him, that he has been commanded to be patient. He will not attack us. He will not raise a sword to us. So they took the husband of Zahra with a rope around his neck and dragged him through the streets of Medina. But wa Zahra, they say that in this condition, Zahra, the first defender of wilayah, in her condition, immediately put on her cloak and her garb, forgetting her own condition, ran through the streets after Ali, calling to them and saying, "Oh, leave Ali." An enemy of Allah raised his hand on Zahra in the streets of Medina, began to strike the daughter of Rasulullah in Medina to Nabi, to the extent where the Tariq writes, Fatima called out, "I am not asking you to leave Ali. I am asking you to not strike me in the streets of my father's city." They describe and say, they left off the hand from Fatima. She again stood, proceeded to the masjid where they now had encircled Ali, threatened his life to give bay'ah or to end his life. Zahra raised her hands for dua. They said as the hands were raised, we saw the walls of the city of Medina raised so high that a camel could have walked under these walls. The daughter of Rasulullah called out, "I am insisting you let him go now, or I will make a dua against you in such a way that this city will come down upon itself." In the fear of the words of Zahra, they released Ali. They turned away from him. Zahra collected Ali. The two began to walk back. Ali said, "Zahra, are you okay?" She replied, "If you are okay, Ali, then I am okay." The condition of these two was such that the Imam Ali says, "I saw Hassan walking with me. My child Hassan was crying. I asked him, 'Hassan, why are you crying?' He says, 'Mama, if you had seen what I saw, you would cry too.' He says, 'My child, what did you see?' He says, 'Mama, I saw them strike the face of my mother so hard. Her eye became injured and she could not see from the eye.' Imam Ali would reply, 'Oh, my son, this is why when I spoke to your mother Zahra, she would not look at me as she spoke to me, that I should not see this wound that she possessed.'" The impact of this is seen in Karbala. When you look at the battle of Abu Abdullah, in every moment that he took his greatest force to protect the women. Let no woman come to the difficulty my mother saw in Medina, as long as Hussein is alive. Which is why Abu Fadl never went to fight, he went to protect the women. And which is why when Abu Fadl fell, Hussein called out alone, I have seen my mother cry in Medina. No woman should cry the same way while Hussein is alive. Which is why they would say, when Hussein was alone and we did not know if he was alive or dead, but Al-Jibr said, mention the name of Zainab. If Hussein is alive, he will reply. Why? Because the Khidam of Abdullah after Medina would not allow that any of the women of the house of Rasulullah should ever even suffer the way Sayyidah Zahra did in the fear of swords, in the fear of fire, in the abuse in the hands of men. Which is why they describe and say from Tillah Zainabiyah, when that sister called out in loneliness that she saw one man with again a hujum around him. She called and said, Anta akhi Hussein. No one answered because of the difficulty of the condition of Imam Hussein. She said, Ya akhi jawabini idan kunta akhi. If you are my brother, then answer me. No answer came. Finally, she said, if you are my brother by the right to our mother's Allah, answer me. Abu Abdullah called out, O Zainab, Hussein is alive. Return to the tents. Do not come out in this condition. يا الله بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها. Ya Allah, accept this majlis from us. Hear the thawab of this majlis, our Mu'min, tonight's sponsor, the all Mu'min, Mu'min, dua. Ya Allah, by the right of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, by the right of Zahra, by the right of the difficulties of Ali Muhammad, remove our difficulties, fulfill our hajat, cure our sick ones, and help our insecure ones. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path, Ahlul Bayt. Hasten the appearance of Sahib Hussain. In custody of family to the best course of Allah. Martin Hussein.
का गम कल्ब से गम नया एक मिल गया है कत्ले मोहसिन का तुझे कल्ब रोता था फातिमा ज़हरा कल्ब रोता था फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा वक्त नेज़ा आने वाली से यही फरियाद की आपकी खिदमत जो पूरी कर न पाई या अली यूं है शर्मिंदा फातिमा ज़हरा यूं है शर्मिंदा फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा बाद मेरे प्यार से बच्चों को रखना या अली ना कभी महसूस होने देना मादर की कमी अब चली दुखिया फातिमा ज़हरा अब चली दुखिया फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा शब की तारीकी में मैयत को मेरी ले जाना तुम जालिमों को मेरी मैयत पर न आने देना तुम होगी महवे बुका फातिमा ज़हरा होगी महवे बुका फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा हाय मज़लूमा फातिमा ज़हरा
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए 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 बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने तेरे दरबारी मेरे घर को जलाने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने तेरे दरबारी मेरे घर को जलाने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने आए बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे ज़माने बाबा मेरी तू दासी पे तड़प जाता था तेरी उम्मत के फर्द मुझको रुला जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
तेरी तहरीर को झुटला के सनद फाड़ी गई और गवाहों को है रास्ते से हटाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा मेरी तू दासी पे तड़प जाता था, तेरी उम्मत के फर्द मुझको रुलाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
कलमा पढ़ के तेरे हाथों जो मुसलमान हुए, बाबा वो लोग मेरे घर को गिराने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
जल्दी ही आके मिलूंगी मैं है तुझसे बाबा, जख्म जाले वा मुझे जालिम लगाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
तेरे दरबारी मेरे घर को जलाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
जल्द ही आके मिलूंगी मैं है तुझसे बाबा, जख्म जाले वा मुझे जालिम लगाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा मेरी तू दासी पे तड़प जाता था, तेरी उम्मत के फर्द मुझको रुलाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
तेरे दरबारी मेरे घर को जलाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए।
कलमा पढ़ के तेरे हाथ कैसे जमाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए। बाद तेरे क्या बताऊं मैं है बाबा साईं, जख्म क्या क्या तेरी बेटी पे न जाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए। बाद तेरे क्या बताऊं मैं है बाबा साईं, जख्म क्या क्या तेरी बेटी पे न जाने आए। बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए, बाबा बेटी पे तेरी कैसे जमाने आए। या हुसैन 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 या हुसैन
या हुसैन या हुसैन
या हुसैन
या हुसैन
या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन।
कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही, 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 कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही। जलते दरवाजे कले सिसकियाँ लेती रही, हाय माँ ज़ैनब की कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही, कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही। कितनी बेबस थी मदीने में नबी की दुख के, जल का दरवाजा किसी ने ना उठाया के, हाय कैसा था सितम के कुड़िया पे कदम, आ गए घर में शकी कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही, कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही, कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही। ताने सुनते थे ये बाजार में लोगों से अली, इसने मारा था हमारे ही बुजुर्गों को कभी, हमने यूं बगला लिया कत्ल ज़हरा को किया, कुछ न कर पाया अली कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही, कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही। जिस घड़ी हो गया रुखसार में पैबाश्क गोगर, रोके कहता रहा खुद से अबू तालिब का पिसे, ऐसे कटता ना तुझे मौत आ जाती मुझे रहे फातिमा रोती रही कलमा गो हंसते रहे साकी दरबार से रोते हुए आते थे हसन माँ के कदमों के निशानों को मिटाते थे हसन उस पे ये जुल्म हुआ हाथ जालिम का उठा खाक पर सहारा गिरी कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही बाप की कब्र पे दीवारें पकड़ कर जाना और रोते हुए उस हाल में वापस आना इस अज़ियत की मगर है सकीना को खबर फातिमा कैसे चली कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही कलमा गो हंस के रहे फातिमा रोती रही या हुसैन
توجه السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا حبيب الله السلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين السلام عليك يا شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين أرواح التي حلت بفنائك السلام عليكم أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان الأمان من فتنة الزمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله
صل على محمد.
There will be a majlis on Monday also, because tomorrow is the first of Jamadi-ul-Thani. The dates changed, so we did not plan any majlis for Monday. Now, because of the sighting of the moon, we received the notice today that tomorrow is the first of Jamadi-ul-Thani, so we'll also have a majlis Monday night at 7 p.m. That'll be on the second. That'll be Shab of the third. Shab of Shahada. I'll announce tomorrow.
दुश्मन फातिमा ज़हरा बिलाना